Hello, and welcome back to the Live Well podcast. Today, we are diving into a very popular topic, something I'm always asked about, and that is how to make money flow like crazy. So, we all want money to flow like crazy, but a big thing that stops the flow, right, is resistance in your nervous system. So, I want you to think about money like a river. Money is like water. And when we think about the flow of money, right, we need it to be able to move smoothly through a river. If there's any obstructions, right, if there are beavers who have built a dam in the water, then the flow stops or the flow experiences resistance, right? You might think of it like a stream where there's maybe rocks, right? The stream of the water starts to flow slower and slower. So when you have resistance in your nervous system, it is like adding on those elements into the stream of the river, whether that's rocks, whether that's sticks. Depending how much resistance you have, that will start to really block the flow of water. So I want you to think about less that, oh, I need more water to flow through the river, and more about where is there actually resistance that is stopping the flow of water. And this is where I think people get very mistaken that, oh, there needs to be more water, more water. There's not enough water in the stream to actually make it flow. But 99.9% of the time, it's actually the resistance in your stream, right? Your resistance towards money that's actually blocking it from flowing like crazy, right? So where does this resistance come from? The resistance there is all of that stuff in your nervous system, all of the fear, all of the guilt, all of the shame. And so it's not just one thing, right? If we think about if it was one thing, one stick in the water, well, the water wouldn't stop flowing like crazy. But it's how that compounds through all the different resistances that you have, right? So it's not just one fear. It's not just one aspect of guilt. It's not just one aspect of shame, right? It's all the different ones that you have in your river that are stacking. So let's break some of these apart. Let's take shame, for example. If you have shame about where you came from, maybe the money that you had growing up, if you have shame about your current money or finances, if you have any kind of shame about what that would mean if you had money, right? Does that mean you're a bad person, a greedy person, a worse person, right? You can see how all, even just these thoughts, another stick, or another rock into your flow, into your kind of river. And then we have things like guilt, right? So guilt is, well, if I have money, does that come from somebody else? Or guilt can be, who am I to have that much when other people don't? Or, if I have it, that means it comes from somebody else, right? So then we get more sticks and more stones getting thrown into your river, right? So it all starts to stack. And then we have fears, and fears are normally big ones. So I want you to think about fears as not really the little sticks, but the giant logs that get thrown in, or the giant rocks that get thrown in that block the flow. And so you might think, well, Liv, does that really make sense? Like if I desire more money, how could fear stop me from getting more money? But it's the fear of not having it that actually resists the flow of it, right? It's the fear of what will happen if you get it. It's the fear that you may never get it, right? It could be fear of anything associated with it. So when we really start to think about, all right, all the fears, all the guilt, all the shame that stacks up in your river, you see how that takes you out of the receiving zone. You see how all these little resistances in my nervous system really contract everything, really make that beaver dam so that the water cannot flow like crazy. Again, I really want you to remember the water is already there. It's already desiring to flow like crazy. You are the one who is offering up resistance to that and is blocking the flow. So I want you to think this is not about manifesting harder. And so what happens is when people feel, the resistance, they're like, okay, I can see that the water is not flowing. I can feel that it's not flowing like crazy. There must be something, quote unquote, blocking it. Let me try harder, right? Let me push, let me force, let me try to manifest, let me try to visualize, let me try to script, let me try to, I don't know, whatever the latest trendy method is. But that's not actually what you have to do, right? Because when you think about all those things that you're consciously doing, right, that is the conscious effort that you're putting in. What rules 95% of the show is your subconscious mind. So if you are doing all of these things, and they are not bad things to do, but they are 5% of the equation, you are missing the 95%. The 95%, which is your subconscious, which is that nervous system response to it. And this is why it can feel like you're throwing spaghetti at a wall, hoping it's going to stick, or why you feel like you're running in the same loops or the same patterns, or it's like Groundhog Day all the time, because those actions don't actually change your nervous system response to money. If you do not change your nervous system response by dissolving all of those sticks and stones, the shame, the guilt, the fear, the resistance, it's actually not going to remove all of that. And that's why when you remove all of that, it flows like crazy, right? And perhaps you've experienced glimpses of you remove it, and then a flow comes in. So what happens is you remove it and the water starts to flow. You're like, oh my God, the money came in, this happened, amazing. But then it stops and it slows down and it feels like you get stuck in the same pattern again. You're like, okay, why? Like, okay, it was good, but then it happened again. Like I got back into that loop. That's because the resistance happened again, right? So you cleared out the resistance temporarily, so money flowed like crazy, but you then offered up more resistance again. You started feeling the shame, the guilt, the fear, etc. You threw more sticks, stones, logs into your stream, and we blocked the flow again. So really remember this, because that subconscious part is the part that's actually going to make it flow like crazy. Now, it's not just, all right, I'm going to visualize and, if I feel the feelings, I think like the standard trendy advice everyone hears is the subconscious doesn't know the difference between what you imagine in your head and what you see. True. However, if you still have nervous system entanglements there where you have the fear, the guilt, the shame, that is going to dictate it more than the 10 minutes you spend visualizing, yourself on a plane or traveling here or living in this house or having X amount of money in your bank account. And that's because, right, when we think of a nervous system response, it's a very somatic response. You feel it in your chest. You feel that pit in your stomach. You feel like your heart rate increase. You can feel it like in your palms. It's this very somatic response. So that doesn't change when you visualize, right? You visualize in the morning or for that brief amount of time, but it doesn't change your nervous system response throughout the day. And a perfect indicator for this will be in that time that you spend visualizing or feeling the feelings, are you actually consistent like that throughout the day? Or are you just like that for the 10 or 30 minutes or that period, and then as soon as something happens, you offer up resistance. As soon as something happens, you go into fear, you go into guilt, you go into shame, you go into lack. And then you're right back where you started. You offered up resistance. And so this is where, and the people kind of like miss the mark, is they're failing to merge that subconscious, that somatic, nervous system response with those feelings that they're feeling. Now, the third element when it comes to this is being able to trust that money will move for you. And when you trust yourself with money, you can then trust money to move for you. However, when you have nervous system responses, you don't feel like you can trust money. You don't even necessarily feel like you can trust yourself with money. It's a different frequency, right? When you are believing it's going to come. It's even a different frequency when you are hoping. Like, let's actually break down the difference between hoping and like certainty and knowing. Hoping is like wishful thinking, right? Hoping is like, I hope the money comes in. I hope this happens. I hope it's a light feeling. When you think I hope, it immediately goes up into the air, up into your head. Like it's a upwards frequency. When we think about certainty and knowing is like deep in your core. It is deep in like your sacral, in like your root. It's like, I know this to be true. Think about, I don't know, your name. You probably know what your name is. Like, oh, I know my name is this. Versus like, oh, I hope my name is this. Different. It's a very subtle, but very, very powerful energetic frequency difference. And so when you trust yourself with money and you trust money to move for you, you move from that hoping frequency to a frequency of certainty. That is a massive difference when it comes to making money flow like crazy. When you know it, it is like a blasting, water out of a hose on full force. It is powerful. It is whoosh. It's like a ripple. It's like a tsunami in terms of like energetic power. Versus I hope it's kind of like a little wave. It's like, okay, I hope it comes. And so I really want you to ask yourself, like, are you in hoping or are you in knowing? Because also the way you show up when you know versus the way you show up when you hope is entirely different. You can feel the frequency difference, but your micro behavior is different. The tone of your voice is different. Your body language is different. Your eye contact is different. Your posture is different. The way you move, the moves you make are different. Think about the way you move with money when you trust it to know. And like, let's think of an example. You probably trust yourself to spend $20. You can go to the coffee shop, go to Starbucks, whatever. You can get yourself a drink and like, yeah, I know that I can move this amount of money and it'll come back. Like I don't have any kind of quabbles about it. If you don't feel that kind of knowing with the level of money, the level of wealth you're trying to anchor in, that is your gap. That is showing you where your nervous system is not on board yet. Remember, you can always calibrate your nervous system to a higher level. So this was going to be like a great exercise for you, a great barometer to kind of see where your nervous system sits. That knowing versus hoping. And so what people tend to do is when they're in hoping, they tend to like hope harder, right? Or hope bigger. But if what you're trying to hope for, you can't back it up with the frequency of certainty, you are actually better off. I'm not going to say like aiming lower, but playing with the edge where you can know with certainty and collapsing that time versus operating in a hoping. And we're going to have a whole episode on collapsing time. But when it comes to flowing like crazy, you're better off with that knowing, with that certainty, and then that momentum starts to build, right? Because when you play with that and you operate with that certainty and you start to see it flow, then you're like, okay, I got this, I know this. And then you compound on that feeling versus being in that hoping and then you just perpetuate more hoping. And then when it doesn't come and it doesn't arrive and you feel like it's not working, what happens? You get that nervous system response. You offer up more resistance. We got more sticks and stones and logs in your river of money again. And then we have to clear those out one by one. And so another thing that comes up, right, is like, all right, is it just me that's throwing sticks and stones into my river? Is it just me throwing logs? Like, Liv, I'm telling you, it's so-and-so's fault. They threw the log into my river. Or it's society's fault. It's the economy's fault. It's this kind of fault. It's this, they're the ones throwing the logs. It is their fault. And I'm going to tell you, you are the only one who can allow logs to be thrown or sticks or stones into your river. You are the only one, right? You have the power to take them out. You have the power to allow them in. It is all within like your operating system. I want you to think about it like you are a core operating system and you get to be the bodyguard. You get to be like the bouncer about what gets in and what doesn't. So then I also want you to ask yourself, all right, what have I been allowing into my frequency? What have I been allowing into my nervous system that is giving me the experience that it's not flowing like crazy, right? Have I adopted other people's beliefs that it's not flowing like crazy? Am I surrounding myself with the belief that it's not flowing like crazy? So then when you start to believe because everyone else is telling you it's not flowing like crazy, you're like, oh, I guess it's not flowing like crazy. And this might sound simple, but this is how you start to adopt and you get all of this noise in your system. And I think about it, anytime you hear this, does your system expand or does it contract? Right? Normally it contracts when you have all this outside noise. So the less noise there is, right, the more it can flow. Which is why, like, you think about it as putting boundaries up on your river, right? Fences up. so that nothing can get into the river. You can build the fences, but it's up to you to build those fences so that nothing gets into your river. You cannot fault things that go into your river if you don't put those standards up, if you don't put those boundaries up. And so this is why it's so important, because when you do so, you develop your own trust, right? We're coming back to that trust element. The reason you have certainty, the reason you have knowing is because you trust yourself. But if you are not willing to trust yourself because you haven't built that internal trust, right? When we think about trust, trust is something that is built. So you have to build your own trust with money in order to trust that money will move for you, in order to be that leading, that commanding force, so that you know when I move with money, money responds to me. It is not the other way around. You're not responding to money, money responds to you. You become the leading energy. And so bringing this all together, this is what we really mean about getting your brain and your body on board, right? We can't have these incongruencies where there's resistance in your nervous system, there is tension, because that is the only thing that's blocking it from flowing like crazy, right? All of those things are like stop signs. You are literally pushing it away from you. It is right there. I promise you, there is more than enough right there waiting to come to you. It's about you releasing and letting it go. It's about you removing those sticks, those stones, those logs. You're putting up the fences. You're building trust in yourself. You trust yourself to move with it a little bit. You operate in that knowing. You operate in that certainty. And then money starts to flow like crazy.